Any questions? Just do it, right? Easy to say. It is time for questions. We can do some questions too. I've talked long enough. That's enough. What's on your mind? You have a question here. So we've got a microphone coming your way. Okay. Well, one at a time, and we'll give other people chances too.
Okay. I just try to absorb what you have said, but I think what I get a little bit problem understanding on number 3. Oh no, sorry. This actually is a little bit smeared between all the four subjects here. But what I'm thinking is, since we are human beings, we still live in life, and in life, when we were born, we already cry. That means, I believe in dukkha. I do. However, so I'm thinking of if in our lives, if we don't have any we don't make any effort, or we don't have a set a goal, or if we don't have a determination. For example, I as a practicing Buddhist, I have desire to practice Buddhism diligently, or maybe eventually I will become a nun. However, I wouldn't have a high expectation of the outcome, but it's just from now until there, I will try to have some motivation and dedication, not to become something, but to be just like resting. That means I feel like I'm so passive. I know what you mean, but if, for example, I don't try to meditate every day. I don't mean that practice makes perfect, but some dedication, some effort. So if you say in here, that rest, so I wonder, how can I be rest in life? Because I'm not. How can I be?
I didn't quite catch what you just said.
Okay.
Say that last line again.
I wonder, as human beings, we have some, at least, motivation in life, or effort, or some progress in life. So if you have any kind of desire, like myself, wanted to become a Buddhist, and even I'm a Buddhist, but I wanted to practice as a actual Buddhist, what I mean, just like a Buddhist by tradition. So if for example, I just have to give an example because I don't know how to express in a way that you can understand me. For example, if I want to meditate every day, of course, I know the goal of doing meditation is to achieve a certain calmness, or to reach to certain level of spirituality. So if we don't determine, or we don't try to be persistent, or any motivation or dedication of doing it, I would just go with the flow, make it go easily, and okay, if I have time to do it, if I don't. So I'm thinking that maybe the motivation or dedication or effort without having any expectation of the outcome, could that be reasonable in a way?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, if you don't have some sort of inspiration or
that's
healthy desire, you're never going to go anywhere. If you just go with the flow, you're going to drown.
That's right. So it's like good desire, good motivation, or bad. I know that either or. And again, this is concept of duality.
Yeah.
But right now,
this is a path of effort. It is not a passive path.
Yeah, you make it.
Yeah, clear. I mean, I hope you get that, if nothing else from today. This is, when we talk about accepting things the way they are, or, not fighting against those things that we can't control, that doesn't mean we're just kind of trying to develop ourselves as little jellyfish that, or not doing anything, but just kind of blithely sitting there. You do that like you just drown, But it's trying to have some sense of discernment about where we put our energies,
right.
And we put our energies into what we can do something about and what we can control, which is a lot.
Oh.
it takes a lot of energy and a lot of inspiration. And the Buddha, as much as the Buddha talked about don't have desires, he was talking about the kind of desire that's like craving, sensual craving for existence. He wasn't talking about like the kind of desire that you need to practice, inspiration, different kinds of desire. Tanha is that craving that he was talking about that we need to let go of. But chanda is zeal or inspiration to put the effort in to practice. And we have to have, as human beings, we do have to have reasonable ways to frame that for ourselves to motivate us, to keep us going.
Yeah, even if we're just a little bit judgmental that way, because we still see good and bad, in duality of life. So it's a good effort and a bad effort, or you mean, so it's not totally objective. It's somewhat personal, somewhat subjective in a way, or we see life. Like if, for example, if I sit and say, okay, it's easy for me, I would just don't do it if I just get a little bit, headache or something. But I try really hard to sit regardless.
Good.
So that's is considered effort of doing something, not just let go or just, just set it free or just don't do anything. So I kind of a little bit confused on that, being passive or being...
Who's saying to be passive and don't do anything? Who's telling you that?
That's how I feel. Okay.
That's
that.
You mentioned expectation.
No expectation of the outcome, but just try our best. Try to do something, and with the motivation and.
Well, you have to have some sort of reasonable. I mean, it's an expectation, but it's not you're not measuring every single step of the way because you're impatient. You need to have some sense of what you're doing is actually having an effect or will have an effect, and that's just what you develop as you go along and develop practice and experience and faith in the path. And so you have to have reasonable benchmarks, but you have to realize that a lot of, most of the path is planting the seeds and tending the soil and watering it, and that the results come on their own pace. Ajahn Chah used to talk about the simile of planting something. You plant a seed, you take all the weeds off around it, you tend to the soil, you fertilize it, put water on it, give it a good environment, and then it will grow naturally. If you get this little sprout that starts to come up, and you get impatient with expectation, and you start to pull it, you want to make it, grow faster and get bigger, then you just pull it out and you ruin it, don't you? You kill it. So, yeah, but you have to also have the wisdom to watch that, the seed is sprouting, or it's not. Maybe I'm not putting enough fertilizer onto it. Maybe I'm not watering it enough. Maybe I haven't pulled enough of the weeds off if it's not growing at all. But then you have to let nature take its course. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back here.
So I have sorry, that sounds really loud. Is it loud?
That's better now.
Okay. I have a kind of more specific question, which is about one of the categories of clinging to beliefs or ideas or perception. When you were going through the 4 categories, that one had some particular resonance for me and some particular resonance with some recent events in my life that hark back to my entire life. But, where in interpersonal reactions, all of what can melt down when a misunderstanding happens, when someone does a behavior that hurts or perceives you in a way based maybe on a misunderstanding in a hurtful way, perceives something about your intention that wasn't what you meant, and the kind of snowball that can happen there, right? Because you had given the example of the person who seemed mean on first impression. Then they're like, oh, no, maybe they're okay. Who knows what that was about? You make friends, and then one day they're mean again. You're like, ah. And so in your response to all of that, it seems like there's some sort of equanimity that we should be aiming for, but I don't really understand what that looks like, right? Like how it almost seems insane that you would, if someone was mean to you, just walk right into that again, openly. It also is challenging if someone's like, let's say, accusing you of something or believing something about you that wasn't what you intended, not to want to defend yourself or not to want to get in it, right? And yet there's a snowball that can happen in those things. And I just wonder, what does the process of freedom and of almost de-escalating, the process of like coming back to neutral, of not getting wrapped in the ideas that come from perceptions to the behaviors that then come from that and the self-reinforcing stuff that happens. Like, what does that look like, and how does a person learn?
Do it. Yeah. It's a lifetime of practice. Yeah, and it comes in small bits and pieces. It's so important to see, to be able to feel and experience the painfulness of those kinds of interactions or difficulties without moving into reaction. There's a fine line. And it's just giving yourself the space and the time to really understand it. But restraining from immediate reaction, because it's usually that impulsive desire to be rid of the uncomfortable feeling that comes along with it. Somebody is cruel to us or says something hurtful, and it really hits the heart. And there's this sense of got to do something about it. It's not the verbal sense, but there's a sense of need to react somehow, need to get rid of this feeling, this pain, don't want it, got to do something. And that's usually when we do something that contributes to the problem, either internally or externally. If we react to it immediately, we keep it snowballing by saying something. If we totally blank out on it internally and just go into straight repression and denial, then, we just internalize it to the point that it'll come up at some other point in time, there's a certain, the equanimity quality is slowly developed, and it's through just allowing that space to experience a painful feeling with a lot of clarity and spaciousness, and not moving into reactivity immediately. And it really takes a strong presence of mind to do that. It's not easy. But, all I can say is that the times that I have been able to be really present with an experience that's unpleasant in the moment, and just to wow, whew, this is painful, but not to kind of engage, but not to deny. You're just there with the painful experience, because it's our belief that we can't bear it that causes us to react quickly. But the more experience we have with just holding that and developing our sense of spaciousness around it, the more we realize, oh, maybe I can bear it. Maybe I can hold the pain and the difficulty of this without pushing it down, without trying to act on it to get rid of it. So that gives us a sense of, in a sense, the impersonality of it. It's a phenomena that is experienced, that if it's held with that kind of equanimity, and we don't get absorbed into it or resistant to it, or push it away, then we do experience the fullness of the pain, but through that not reacting in terms of an action of speech or of bodily action, we give it the opportunity to arise, have its time, and then pass away. And we develop an insight that, this is a conditioned phenomena that is not pleasant, and I wish it weren't there, and it may have been the result of somebody else's unskillfulness. But I don't need to buy into the whole process. And then if it's an interaction or a person or an event that is an ongoing one, once the rush and the emotion, the difficulty has subsided somewhat through that kind of just being able to hold it, with patience, then perhaps there will be an opportunity to attend to the skillfulness that you want to develop in yourself or other people, or, have other people see. And, perhaps there will be an opportunity for dialogue, interaction. But it's also amazing how sometimes just your being able to maintain that spacious presence can have an immediate effect on the other person. I mean, I've seen it, it's rarer than I would like in my life that I've been able to meet it with that kind of equanimity, but the times that I have, somebody comes at me and says something that's startling or disconcerting or critical or painful. And if I've had that space to just, not buy into a reaction and to just be there with it. And maybe, just to be able to say, even verbally, something like, ooh, that really hurts. Without commentary, without judgment, without saying, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't experience, you shouldn't be doing that, you're doing this to me, you always, that whole thing, that whole perceptual realm. But just to acknowledge the experience, acknowledge the feeling tone as what you're experiencing, but without judging the other person, just to be able to say that, and for them to hear that in a clear, gentle, non-judgmental way. I can't tell you how much of an immediate effect that sometimes has. Like all of a sudden the person is confronted with the mirror. If you're a clear mirror, then they can see what it is that they've put out, much more clearly. And then they can say, oh, right, I didn't mean that for it to come out that way, or I didn't intend for you to have that kind of reaction. It's sort of like it was, an unskillful thing on my part. Just by being with it, and you're not immediately jumping into reactivity, can be one of the best gifts you give to somebody else to help them see it. But it takes practice and patience and the willingness to be misunderstood. This is what human reality is about, is people saying things in ways that we all, we interpret it through our own lens of sensitivities and reactivities and, our own conditioning. We pick up something in the wrong way, or they say something in the wrong way, or maybe it was a little hurtful, but we really pick it up and, chew on it. It's sort of like this is what happens as human beings. This is all part of it. And to kind of just understand that it's not going to be perfect.
Hello, Ajahn. I would like to kind of add on what she was talking about there, because to me it seems like the teaching is very clear that forms, feelings, perceptions, mental constructs of any form are not self, so are not to me meant to be clung to. So it really wouldn't matter what somebody else was doing, that if you saw this, if you saw this through the lens of what the Buddha was talking about, then you wouldn't take any of that personal. And I can think of many of the stories where he didn't take the bait for these kinds of things. People were always challenging him and confronting him and testing him. And so it's like if you take these perceptions and think, if you don't take them personal, if you don't identify with them, then you wouldn't be worried about what other people said or did at all, because it wouldn't stick to you. And to me, that's what this whole teaching is about, what craving and clinging is about, that you're not craving, you're not becoming anything other than it's just the direct experience, like, anger has arisen, or however you want to paint it, however you want to see it. But you wouldn't take it personal, because you're seeing it through a whole nother lens. So, just want to...
Yeah, absolutely. It's that is one of the major ways that we can reduce our suffering is by reducing the sense of ownership, taking things personally. It may be a little bit of a bit of an understatement to just sort of say, oh, well, that's all you have to do. It's a big thing. The sense of self permeates, most of our experience. And you can't just intellectually say, oh, well, it's not self, has nothing to do with me. It's a very deeply ingrained process of selfing that we do. So, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but it's it is the order of the day, and it's so deeply ingrained that it takes a lot of patience and practice and energy and effort to just maintain that practice, to sort of slowly reduce that way we operate under the sense of self. Yeah. And it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't work to develop skillfulness. Oh, that's just anger. It's not me. It's not who I am. Sometimes they call that like spiritual bypassing. It's kind of like using a concept to dismiss the impact of a particular, unskillful way of being in the world. And I know that's not what you're saying, but sometimes people can get into that mode of, oh, it's all impermanent. It all passes. I don't need to worry about it. It's sort of like it's all not who I am, so I can, really do anything I want to. The whole crazy wisdom kind of a thing, which is kind of crazy. Because any actions that we have with intention will have results, whether we believe that it's not really me or that it all changes anyway. Still, if we act on certain states of mind and express them in certain ways in body or speech or in mental activity, then it will still have its karmic results. So skillfulness is important, as well as developing that insight into not self.